Welcome to Building Conversations, a construction podcast powered by the STO Building Group. August 2021 marked the 50th anniversary of StructureTone, STO Building Group's flagship company. And since then, we have been sharing stories of the company's history through the special oral history series of the podcast. In this episode, we reflect back on the day that changed New York City and the world forever. September 11th, 2001. Hear from some of those who were there that day, who rushed to the scene, and who have ever since honored and remembered the 3 employees and many friends, clients, family members, and partners we lost. Their story is part of our story. We will never, ever forget. Again, welcome to Building Conversations and Episode 6 of StructureTone's 50th Anniversary Oral History Series. By the year 2000, StructureTone was a leading builder in markets across the US, UK, and Ireland. But in the headquarters hub of New York, the company was building some of the city's most transformational projects, like the revitalized MetLife Tower on Madison Avenue. Also around that time, Jim Donaghy had been named executive chairman of the growing organization and held a weekly Tuesday morning staff meeting. But on Tuesday, September 11th, the morning took an alarming, life-changing turn. Jim explains.
Well, it's a tough story for me because I was in our Tuesday morning corporate meeting. At that time, I was the chairman of the company, and I had a weekly Tuesday morning, 8 o'clock staff meeting, if you will. And I was sitting in the room on the I believe it was the 11th floor, and Eugene White had come running up and wanted to know, did you know what was going on? And I kind of looked at him a little puzzled, like, well, that's not good. Why is he barging into this meeting and wanting to know, did I know what was going on? I said, I don't think so. And he said, you got to look at the TV. And I looked up. There was a TV on across the room, and I saw what was going on. And first instinct was not that there was a terrorist attack. I ultimately was on a phone call with our team at the job site that was in the South Building. Our folks were working for the Aon account. Our client, Sandra, who was my client at USA Networks, Sandra Wright, we were working for at Aon. Brendan Lang was our project manager. And we had Kieran Gorman and Anthony Peluso on that site, our super and laborer. They were all lost in the building, along with several dozen tradesmen, some of who I knew when I was a kid.
Everyone in the office was doing the same thing, trying to figure out what was going on. Eugene White recalls how chaotic those initial minutes were.
I was walking through our plan room, and there was a subcontractor that does raised flooring, and I know him very, very well from our collective years in the Goldman Sachs account. And he had his head halfway through the pass-through window to get my attention because I believe that the young men that were working in the plan room thought he was joking about what he was telling them, what was going on downtown. And he said, Eugene, you have to get your guys out of the trade center. There's something going on. I'm on my Nextel with my team. So from where I was standing to our operations department to Tommy Gallagher's office, who keeps in touch with our teams in the field, was a less than 1 minute walk. And by the time I made it over to Tommy's office, I could tell he had a phone call from one of our team members in the trade center. And that day, that's a day obviously I nor anybody will ever forget, especially if you lived through it in Manhattan. We went downstairs and walked just to the corner. Again, maybe it only took us 5 minutes. To the corner of 5th Avenue and 26th Street, where you had a straight shot looking downtown. And at that point in time, only one of the towers had been hit. It was surreal. It was surreal because we knew our teams were in that building. In particular, we knew the team members very, very well. And so it was on our, we hadn't put it all together quite yet, just how significant of a day it would become.
As the details started coming in, the StructureTone team was focused on getting down to the site and determining how to help. That's when the other tower went down. Mike Neary, StructureTone's now president, explains.
I looked down Fifth Avenue. You walked up because you heard a big rumble as if something had, just driven by our window. We were very close to Fifth Avenue there. And I walked down, and when I looked down, and we could see a direct line at the Trade Center where the second plane had hit. Then obviously we all knew, because we weren't sure at first on, was this an accident? Was this, something other than an accident? And when the second plane hit, obviously we knew, and then, you started to hear that on the radio, et cetera. So we were all started to be very concerned about trying to reach out to our workers that were in the building. So, that was the number one priority. What can we do? How can we help?
Jim Donaghy was on his way to the towers as the second crash unfolded.
I had gone down after talking to Brendan and team on the phone as the phone was cutting out. I had jumped in the car and headed down Broadway that day, and I got to about 3 blocks away from the second tower just before it fell. I was beelining, running up the street from whatever that was, cloud. We didn't know what it was as we were running, but it was a game changer in terms of viewing the world differently.
Carl Anushian, longtime leader in StructureTone's New York office, remembers feeling that same way as he drove home that night, that the world had changed forever.
At the end of the day, there were about 5 of us left, probably at 5 or 6 o'clock, and Dewey's was actually still open, one of the Dewey's Flat Iron, the bar on the corner, and we went in and we had one for everybody and got home. We were fortunate enough to be able to drive home, and one thing that always stuck with me was driving home. They waved us through the tunnel, and I live right out of Queens in Nassau County, and they waved us through the tunnel, and I'm driving, and I'm doing 60, 70 miles an hour, just trying to get home, get out. And I look on the other side, heading towards the city, and it was when I came out of the tunnel, and I see state troopers right there. And then as I got out further into Queens, I look, and it's Nassau County cops that are there, blocking off traffic and controlling people. Going a little farther, in Suffolk County cops, and I didn't realize, you still, without the TV and everything, you didn't realize the magnitude of what was going on. You realize that everybody had gotten called in, that, every fireman, every policeman, New York City cop, was in Manhattan, so everything just backed up. Everybody came in to back them up, and that was what I kind of remembered most, was saying, holy cow, this is something different,
As the dust literally settled, StructureTone quickly got involved in the recovery. The team began helping clients in the towers move their operations and pitched in to help the city with debris removal. Mike Neary recalls the effort.
Since the World Trade Center opened, we have had projects in there and workers in there from day one. So there's probably never been a day that we haven't been down at the World Trade Center buildings. Following 9/11, obviously we were trying to help our clients. There were clients that were looking for temporary spaces, wanted to have us help them in whatever form or shape or way we could. They needed some quick space built. They needed to use some space in our office, and all of a sudden we had a little bit of a surge that we had to service these clients in whatever they needed, for some kind of temporary space build-outs. So there was a lot of emergency work that we had to do at the time. So that was going on, and we had been contacted and hired to be part of KPMG's team, who were providing forensic accounting and oversight for the aftermath of 9/11.
As the recovery continued, the impact of 9/11 on buildings themselves began to ripple through the building community. From materials to security, it was a seminal moment in design and construction. Carl Anushian explains.
I think we say lessons learned and what came out of it, not, when it came time to, when you're teaching younger kids, some of the mistakes you made and how you learned from those. Well, I think from here, the things that came out of it, the interesting part was the redesign of buildings, concrete cores, wider stairs, the buttressing of buildings, the life safety and areas of refuge. We did almost all of the fit out in 7 World Trade after it was rebuilt, and that's where you first saw it you saw that new design implemented, where in the Trade Center they were 4-foot wide stairs in 2-hour drywall shaft wall versus 2-foot thick concrete core with 8-foot wide or 7-foot wide stairs to allow movement up and down in a safer, environment. And I think those things, they became the new standard, and we've incorporated that. And I think, we recognize, what that's done. So I think from that end of it, I think there's been the positives that have come out of it have been a smarter design and a safer design for the people, but just such a tragedy that it had to come about in that way.
StructureTone Vice President Stacy Daxon and Dan Finnegan, Executive Vice President of StructureTone New York, agree that safety and security were never the same. And not only for building access, but also knowing who's in the building in case of emergency.
How has the city changed since 9/11? Some of the change that I've seen is certainly in security. Before 9/11, it was very easy to get in and out of buildings in Manhattan. So the security and the restrictions to get into some of these buildings certainly was impacted right away, and it still has changed to this date.
9/11 impacted real estate and construction insofar as augmenting security, augmenting safety protocols, being able to know where your muster points are to make sure that you can account for everybody on your job site, and increase the security that you had to show viable ID and not just your high school ID or a piece of paper that you received the day before from a security guard with your name handwritten. So there were much greater official controls for you to gain access into job sites. And again, the safety protocols that were in place to make sure that you had appropriate head count so that you can always account for people.
The events of the day also inspired fundamental changes to the way companies do business, including StructureTone. Jim Donahue explains.
But once we got past all of that, we realized we've got to build back our business differently. The markets had, been damaged terribly by the dot-com bust, followed by 9/11. So our data center business was forever changed because data center location was now being driven by a different algorithm related to the distance from the home office. We used to build data centers in the same building quite often as the home office, and that all changed forever. We also realized we only had two main client types, financial and data center, as well as other sectors, but we weren't overly focused in them. And we never stopped working on that diversity since. To this day, the importance of diversity continues to be a key ingredient to our strategy.
STO Building Group CEO Bob Mullen joined the organization only a few years later, as the company was still in this recovery mode. He remembers not only how he felt that day, but how impressed and proud he was of how the company, the city, and the nation responded.
The memory for me that night at dinner with my family, which we typically did every night, Debbie and I with our 4 kids. My daughter, which was one of our 2 kids in high school, as we're talking about the events of the day, she was 14 at the time. She turned and looked at me and said, "Daddy, do you think we're safe here in our own home?" It's a question that you really were not expecting to have to answer at dinner that night. But, the other thing that just stuck with me is just the resiliency of the American people to, deal with that situation. It took a long time, but to come back and building New York back and as strong as ever and stronger in many ways, just shows the attitude, the mentality, the resiliency of the American people, in my opinion.
Undoubtedly, the entire world understood the impact of 9/11. But, says Mike Neary, it can't compare to what it felt like to be in New York, to be from New York, on that day and the days after.
We were very connected to it, obviously. People around the country still, will mention it and talk about it. It's something different when you were here and you were in New York or you're from New York. Being on the island of Manhattan and to have an attack happen here is, very different and unique. It's something, that I think our country will never forget and can't forget. But if you think about, the impact that it's had on us in New York, it's second to none on what it means to anybody that was here and actually, was part of our team. When you lose a teammate like that, and we lost 3 people. So you can never forget that, and it never goes away.
After the tragedy on September 11th, Structure Tone established a scholarship program in memory of employees Brendan Lang, Anthony Peluso, and Kieran Gorman. To this day, Structure Tone employees participate in an annual golf tournament in Brendan's name. They run the Tunnels to Towers 5K to honor those who lost their lives, and everyone remembers and reflects in their own special ways. Again, Eugene White explains.
It's hard to put ever into words the emotion. Sorry, but we lost, 3 incredible people and many friends. So it's definitely, I think, a milestone that resides forever in our company's heart. There's not a day that goes by where we go downtown and it's not real still. And certainly on 9/11, we think about these 3 individuals that we lost here. And again, we knew them all well. And we think about their kids now that are off to college and then beyond. We have our memorial scholarship fund for them. And I'm always touched every time I see our 9/11 memorial with flowers.
As Carl Anushian puts it, the world, the nation, New Yorkers, and certainly Structure Tone will never, ever forget.
I'll always, when they say, you'll always see it, never forget, never forget. I don't forget. I made a point to say I vowed I'll never forget it, and I'm angry. I'm angry all the time about it, and I see that those that have suffered, those that are still suffering from their loss, and I remind myself regularly how lucky we are.
We'd like to thank Jim Donaghy, Eugene White, Carl Anushian, Mike Neary, Stacy Daxon, Bob Mullen, Dan Finnegan, and many others for sharing their memories of such a tragic event. This episode is dedicated to Brendan Lang, Anthony Peluso, Kieran Gorman, and the many more peers, friends, family, and New Yorkers lost on 9/11. We continue to honor you, and we will never forget.